Denver real estate agents are awful at pricing homes. Tell me why you think this, Jen. Hi there, I'm Jess Uphoff, and this is this week's episode of Jess'd In. I'm here with my co-host, Elise Santani, and we have Jen Wentworth. She is a local Denver real estate appraiser, and we were just talking before the show, and I can't wait to dig into this. Denver real estate agents are awful at pricing homes. Yes. Tell me why you think this, Jen, because you said comparatively to the rest of the United States, Denver has it wrong. Help me understand your perspective on that.
Absolutely. So every month I do an analysis on this because it's a topic of interest to me. I love seeing local trends, and I've specifically targeted the price reductions as one of the things that I'm tracking. And so historically, Denver, especially in the last 2 or 3 years, we've just been completely off on pricing. The number of homes that have had price reductions that closed in March, 35% of all closed sales had at least one price reduction. For comparison, the national average in February was 16%.
Wow, that's double.
Yeah. Yes.
Double. More than double.
Yes. And back in the fall, we were really looking more in the 44% of all sales had a reduction. So we're in a seasonal decline for reductions, which is typical that we've seen the last 2 years. So this is not that we're getting better. It's that we're in the spring buying season more than anything.
Interesting.
But even when we were tracking in the 40s, the national average was 12% for price reductions. So
why is that? What would you say the reason is that Denver is so much higher?
We got really spoiled during COVID for how high and how fast our values went. And sellers, we're irrational beings. We've all looked at Zillow. We've seen the number. We all have a number in our head of what we think our house is worth. And to be told it's less, we feel like we're losing money because we had that number in our head.
Yeah, we have like an expectation now. While we're on the topic of Zillow, how close are estimates? Is it just trash?
They're trash. They're trash.
They're trash.
There's many reasons.
Consumers should not look at Zestimates.
No, absolutely not. It's a good starting point, but never a good ending point. So the Zestimate and most of the other AVMs, which are the automated valuation models, Redfin, Trulia, all of those, they pull active listings also as part of the value.
And the active listings we just said are completely wrong.
Absolutely. So until it sells, we can't consider it as a comp for value purposes. We can use the active and pendings for illustrating market conditions, but that doesn't show what the market is actually doing for values until it closes. And so for Zillow or the other AVMs to use the active listings, that really skews the values. They also don't take into considerations individual characteristics of the house or of the neighborhood. So some of them pull by zip code. So different neighborhoods perform differently within the same zip code. And so you're not really comparing apples to apples. And so that number, I never find that number to be accurate.
And it sounds like it's always high.
No.
Because I was going to say, if it's pulling active listings, I would imagine if the active listings are too high.
So that was my assumption also.
Okay.
I actually did an analysis of this last month. And it depends greatly on which AVM. So some of them are a little better than others, but most of them are way off. But it was split. It was about half high, half low. Just it depends on the area of town a little bit, but they're not always high.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question about, so as an appraiser, how do you, who's right? So if there's a house on the market for $800, people are willing to pay $850, $900. You go in there and you appraise it at $800.
Right.
Who's right? How does all of that work? And
Sure.
I also want to know about what's behind the appraisal.
Absolutely.
And on that question, one more thing.
Yes.
I've heard a lot of real estate agents argue because there was multiple offers, that warrants, is that factored into your opinion of the value?
So yes and no. So I always want to know if there's multiple offers involved, because while it doesn't impact the opinion of my value, it does help me justify and support some of the market conditions that I'm going to present in the report. So if I can say it's an increasing market, I can back that up because there were multiple offers on this property. But as far as the appraisal values, We don't define the market. We're just reporting the market. And so the point of the appraisal is to determine the most probable price a home would sell to a typically motivated buyer in the current market. And so some of these bidding situations, you have atypically motivated buyers. They want to be at that school. They have family in the neighborhood. They have a friend on that street. There's oftentimes different motivations that are not purely just buying a house.
Yeah.
And that does impact the value. But if you have 4 people willing to pay over the list price, but the market doesn't support it, our value is not going to be what you want probably because we're tied to what the market supports.
So what are you looking at specifically when you look at a house? Is it the neighborhood? Is it the comps? Is it the specific house? Like what
So it's all of the
upgrades have been done?
things. And so when we're doing appraisals for lending purposes, we're bound by the requirements of the various lenders and Fannie, Freddie, or FHA. I don't do VA, but we have very specific guidelines and requirements we have to work within. And so we have to bracket everything. So that means we need a smaller, we need a bigger, we need a finished basement, we need an unfinished basement, we need newer and older, better and worse condition. We have to bracket, find something different for each side of all the features of the house. And so sometimes what we use for comps don't make sense because, there's 3 houses on my street that sold. Why didn't you use those 3 houses? Well, they don't fit within that criteria we have to work within. I see a lot of times from agents, they'll send me their list of comps. All of them are 30% bigger than the subject. Like I can't
That's not
use
a comp.
those. Those aren't comps.
Yeah.
And yes, they give you the higher price, but that's not a comp.
Right.
And
Or
when
they're in a different neighborhood
see that.
across a busy
Yes.
street, right? That's a totally different market.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. The sub-markets make a huge difference, especially right now.
Yeah.
Wow.
How did you get into this?
So we were talking a little before the show, a very winding path. I actually worked in real estate 20 plus years ago in Tennessee. I ran a broker's office, so I did all of his listings and closings, and I was responsible for determining the list price and the price to write offers for. And then also when appraisals came in low, it was my job to work with the appraiser to provide comps that supported the price we wanted. And things worked a little differently back then than they do now. And this is when the MLS was still the books. We didn't even have the online database to really search. And so it was definitely a different time, but I always found the pricing component really interesting, but never looked into the appraisal option because I was going a different career at the time for when I was in school.
Yeah.
And over the years, I've often mentioned to my husband, I wish I would have looked at that a little bit more because it still seems really interesting. And so several years ago when I brought it up again, he finally was like, why don't you just look into it for real?
Yeah.
Actually do it for once. And so I did, and the rest is history.
Wow.
I have heard that the reason that we don't, like for a while we had a shortage of appraisals and appraisers. And I think that was during COVID, obviously, when everything was crazy.
Yeah.
But I also heard that the industry was not set up for appraisers to be attracted to get into it because you make no money in the beginning.
Yes.
No one wants to mentor you because there's no compensation, right? So
absolutely,
there's struggles to get licensed.
It's not an easy industry to get into in that you have your required course work, and that's the easy part. And so you get done with your coursework and you think, great, I just need to find a mentor. That's really hard. It took me 9 months to find a mentor. And I lucked into one who ended up being amazing. And I'm so fortunate. And I don't know that I would have become an appraiser had I not found one because I was pretty much had given up hope at that point. Many appraisers feel it's a liability to take somebody on. There have been some bad apples. There's stories of trainees signing appraisers' name to things and just other things, that circulates in the industry. So that kind of scares people off from wanting to do it. Also, either we're too busy to take somebody on to train or we don't have any work to do with them to train. And so it's kind of there's not a good time to take somebody on for most appraisers. And also there's no compensation. So it's truly just giving back to the profession, which is great when people are able to do it, but it's a big ask otherwise. And then also you don't know what you're going to get. You could have a big personality conflict and they could be flaky. You don't know what you're signing up for when you get somebody either.
How do you think AI and the future of your industry? I'm curious about that. Like, what do you think is going to happen?
So there's been a lot of talk about this for the last several years in the appraisal world. We're all watching things very closely. There was a lot of buzz when hybrid appraisals first came out, and they're gaining popularity now since they're now accepted by Fannie and Freddie. We're also looking at a huge increase in appraisal waivers that just
I just got
went
one at
into effect.
85%, which
Yeah.
I've never had before.
So the waivers, depending on the criteria and the loan you're getting, have been moved up to 90 and up to 97% for a waiver.
I was shocked when I got 85.
Yeah.
I was like, I've never gotten an 85 waiver. I had to like triple check it because I was
Yes.
like, there's no way, right? So that's good to know.
Yes.
Interesting. Except
So-
it's not good for you.
It is, but it isn't. So I've definitely seen an increase in more complicated assignments since that went into effect. So they're not the cookie cutter,
Oh,
not
got it.
necessarily the tract house in Highlands Ranch. I'm getting the more one-off things when there aren't any comps. I'm seeing a lot of those assignments come
So
across.
there's more complexity. So do you need
Yes.
to charge more money because it's more of your time?
I would love to, but the rates are the rates for many of the clients.
You're not allowed to.
You can negotiate,
Okay.
but there's still enough appraisers who aren't busy that they'll do it for less. So I had one last week that I'll do it, but I can't do it for the fee you're offering. So I proposed my fee, and they're like, great, we'll get back to you. We're calling down our list. And if no one else will take it, we'll come back. And they never called back. So
Wow.
there's, still appraisers who will do it for less. And that's your personal decision and your business decision.
Yeah,
For
you just
sure.
have to manage
Someone
your
will
time.
always be cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In anything.
It doesn't mean they're better.
The days on market have increased.
Yes.
Does that impact the way that you value it?
It's definitely something to consider. So generally, the days on market, there's a big correlation in price reductions in days on market.
Yep.
So homes with at least one price reduction are on the market on average 70 days longer than homes without price reductions. So that translates to generally a lower realized price when it does sell. So in that way, yes, that is something we consider because it naturally affects the price.
Yeah.
But we definitely look for the outliers. So say if all of our comps were on the market for 20 days and there's one that was on the market for 200 days, probably need to look at that a little bit closer and see if there was something else weird going on, if it had, structural issues
Right.
or why it was on the market for so long. Is it really a good comp or do we need to look at something else?
Yeah.
Right now, I'm curious. When we were just talking with our last guest about a trend I've noticed recently is sellers and listing agents underlisting. All of a sudden, it's like I think it's just this spring that I've noticed it where something's listed at 750 and it's like worth 800,000 and they're just, I don't know if they're trying to create a bidding war or what's happening, but are you noticing that too?
So somewhat. And I haven't seen it as much in my personal business, but I know several people who have recently bought houses and they've been involved in this. And I've heard from other agents that the good stuff that, a nice house shows well, that's priced right, is getting multiple offers and going well over the list price. So I don't know that it's necessarily that they're pricing it low. Is that the buyers have been waiting, and if it's good, they're waiting and they know that they're not going to get this opportunity again and they're willing to pay what they have to pay to get this house. So I don't know if it's so much of a factor of pricing it low rather than buyer demand.
Would you say it would be low though if it appraises? Let's say I got a waiver at 800,000 and they listed it at 750. Is that low or is that the right? What do you think? How would you
Sure.
advise a real estate agent of where to list that house?
So without doing a full analysis, I wouldn't know
Yeah,
because there's a lot of factors
Fair.
at play.
fair.
There's also what we call the rule of confirmation bias, where once the appraiser or once anybody sees a number in their head, say for a value, for a purchase, now we see the contract price. And so, because we have to bracket around the contract price, that isn't supposed to influence our decision for value, but that number is in our head. And so are we more likely to look for comps that are in that general vicinity for price versus if for a refi, we don't know what the value is going into it. We're going in blind. And so, we're sometimes more objective in pulling comps for when we don't know the value going into it.
Interesting.
So there could be instances where, the value, the contract's at 800. So you're looking for comps around that number. That's not how you should act. But psychologically, that's
It's fair though.
Yeah.
how we are programmed to behave as humans. And so we're supposed to, appraisers look at all the data, but having a number in your head can direct how you go sometimes.
Yeah.
So is it fair to say that purchase appraisals come in higher than refi appraisals?
They can.
I mean, it's not a general rule of thumb, but it can happen.
It definitely can. They can also come in lower. It just depends. The main difference is for a purchase, there's a number, whether we're not supposed to take that into consideration, but we've seen the number. Versus refis, you're going in blind and you have no preset perception of what the value should be.
Yeah. What about, so on our side, we're seeing a lot of sellers give credits back.
Yes.
How does that impact how you value? So if everything's coming in that it's sold at $1 million,
Right.
but they kicked back 50 grand.
Yep.
Do you track all of that?
We do. So we actually, as appraisers, we have to verify the terms of sale with a party familiar with the transaction. So either the listing agent, the buyer's agent, somebody related to the sale, because we want to know why the concessions happened, because it absolutely does affect the value. And, I often will find, it's not just for one thing. So there's a property I was working on yesterday. There was $20,000 in concessions. 15 was written into the purchase agreement for buyer rate buy down, closing costs.
Yep.
$5,000 was for repair items. And so we can handle those differently because, would another buyer require the $5,000 in repair items? I don't know. Could the seller, fix a couple of these things for less than $5,000 and then they don't have that $5,000 piece if it were a different buyer, versus if it's written into the purchase agreement, then that was necessary to get the price, basically. So we do take that into consideration. And that's one factor I feel like that does influence some of the overpricing we see that needs the reductions. It was when agents pull the CMA when they're doing their research. There's a lot of information not shown on the CMA. One of those things is any concessions. And so they're only looking at the top line number. So once we adjust for concessions and we adjust for date of sale in a changing market, we end up at a different price from the get-go than they're looking at when they're pricing the house.
Does the packet that they put together for you help?
So I'm going to get on my soapbox. So first of all, love the information. All information is good. Appreciate information. This is a digital age. We have to keep everything electronic for our work, or we have to keep a work file. Electronic is the easiest way to do that. Nobody wants a filing cabinet full of folders.
Right.
And
so giving you a paper packet you don't want.
Well, there's a second reason for that also.
Okay. Sorry.
So, no, you're good. When we go out to a property, we also have to take pictures of all the comps. So we've already pulled our comps. And I reach out to agents before I go out asking if they have comps. Please email them to me by a set time and day. And that way I know where I have to
the
go
listing agent you ask or
the listing agent.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay,
I
I'm
want to
just
see what they looked at when they priced the property.
Okay.
So I have my comps. I take pictures of my comps before I even go to the house sometimes. So if you hand me a packet at the appointment, I have to stop what I'm doing. Just literally yesterday this happened. I'm sitting in my car with this folder with 50 pages of paper. I'm trying to go through. I'm trying to look up properties on my phone that I didn't already have on my list to figure out if I have to go back and take pictures or not. It just adds to my workflow if you give me the information at the appraisal appointment.
Okay.
Yes.
Because we have a lot of real estate agents that we work with. And so that's
I love
helpful
the
to know.
information. Just having it before the appointment is much more useful and helpful than at the appointment.
So the minute you call them to schedule, because you always call to get lockbox.
Or through showing time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the minute the showing gets scheduled, they know it's the appraiser that schedules, right?
Yep.
Some of them do. Because I always hear like, is the appraiser? I'm like, it's due tomorrow. They're like, oh, no one called me. So I get that too. But so the showing gets scheduled. They know it's the appraiser. So the minute that happens, they have your email address and
Yes.
showing time, and they need to send you all their comp data.
Ideally.
Okay.
And also any updates, any features, anything that's not in the MLS about that property, I want to know.
Okay.
Or if there's anything about the comps that's not in the MLS, if they've toured it and it smelled like cat pee, I want to know these things because I'm not going in the comps.
Right.
You guys are the experts. And so any information not in the MLS is super helpful.
And how impactful is like a view? And I know it depends. This is a very relative thing, but
Yes.
I know a lot of
What do you mean a view?
a view, like if you have
mountain views.
Oh.
So do they put that information or like this view is, I'm just curious, like does that hold a lot of weight in some circumstances?
It can. It depends on the market and it depends on where it is. So, for instance, a $400,000 house in Aurora that has a mountain view probably is not going to see a huge adjustment for that view because buyers in that market aren't paying more for a view. They just need a house.
Right.
If you're in Castle Rock and you're up on the ridge and you have an unobscured view of the valley, does that come into play? Absolutely.
Yeah.
How much of an adjustment? It depends on the market and what we determine the market supports at that time. So back during COVID, when prices were just going crazy, people were buying houses. It didn't matter where it was.
Right.
I did an appraisal for a house in Commerce City that was on the train tracks and it was zoned industrial but it was a flip and they had 32 offers in 24 hours and people did not care that it was on the train tracks.
Yeah.
Now they do when they're trying to sell it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so it changes. You know, what should have been an adverse factor wasn't at that time. Now it's a different market. Absolutely an adverse factor.
You have got, I mean, are agents pissed at you all the time? Like,
Probably.
do people have you ever had like a confrontation, like a bad one, or people just angry?
Knock on wood. I haven't had a bad one yet.
Good.
I know my mentors had people come and scream.
Yeah.
Be really mad. I know people aren't always happy with me.
Yeah.
With my opinion, but
it's so subjective.
It is.
You know,
absolutely.
you're in a really tough position.
Yes, absolutely. Because our job, we don't want to screw up the deal.
Yeah.
Right.
We're not trying to be the bad guy. We're not
you
trying to
also
pick
have
apart stuff.
Standards that you have to meet.
We do. And
Right.
so a big one is peeling paint. So if you're listing a house that it can go FHA, we can't have peeling paint or exposed bare wood on the outside. You just cannot. And I'm not going to find one little quarter size area and, call it out. But if it's obvious in the pictures I take, we have to note that. And so people get really mad at that. Absolutely.
What's the best way for an agent to rebuttal? Like, can you give me a quick overview of what you appreciate and what is like offensive to you? Just because I'm sure
sorry.
you
What do you
get,
mean?
when you get an appraisal rebuttal, when like
A
they're not,
reconsideration of value?
yes, please. Sorry. When you receive that, because I've always wondered what's the best way to do it. So can you give agents out there advice on how to do it the right way?
Absolutely. So there's actually new standards that went into effect October 1st with Fannie, Freddie, and FHA. So it's a very specific process now for each lender. When the borrower initiates the loan, they receive information on how to do this. Also, when they receive the appraisal, they receive it a second time. So the borrower is being educated twice what to do if the appraisal comes in lower than they expect. The best thing the agent can do is read the report. Novel idea. Novel idea, but read the report.
They're like, no, not
I
going to
can't
happen.
tell you how many times I've gotten a reconsideration of value request and they give me 4 comps and I've already listed in the report why I didn't use those comps.
Wow.
So read the report.
Yeah.
And then understand the criteria we have to use. Again, if all of your comps are 30% bigger, it's not going to help your case. You have to be objective and actually look for comps.
Yeah.
It's super helpful if you can give the borrower those comps and actually to list out reasons why they're better than the comps the appraiser used. All of that has to go back to the lender from the borrower. The agent can't submit it. They can't send it directly to me. It all goes to the borrower's lender. They review it internally and they decide if they've submitted a good enough case to justify opening a revision request or a reconsideration of value. So if it does,
the lender does?
Yes.
Okay, so
yes. So this is a new thing. So the lender is the gatekeeper now for reconsideration.
not the AMC?
No, it's the actual lender.
Okay.
And so if the lender finds,
Are you thinking, great, something else I have to do?
No, we have an in-house AM. Like we don't have we don't work with an AMC.
Yeah.
We have an in-house appraiser,
Yes.
so which I actually prefer.
Yeah, I
because
do
he
too.
helps me a ton, and he helps our appraisers a ton.
yes.
So I just was curious, since I don't work with an AMC, how that works. So it is the lender. Okay.
It's an actual lender.
Okay.
They have their own internal team that review every single reconsideration of value request. They have to sign off that, yes, this has merit. No, this does not have merit.
Oh,
you
that's
get
good for
one
you.
shot. You get one shot to submit. So make sure you fill out completely, follow all the instructions, because you have just one shot to do this. If they deem it has weight, they will then forward it to the appraiser. We have to comment on, why we didn't do why we didn't include these comps, why we did, why we did what we did. And then oftentimes, though, I will say, when a value comes in low, we go, oh crap, because we know we're going to ruin somebody's day.
Yeah.
And so while it's not our job to hit value, we definitely know this is, a lot of people are going to be mad, and our work is going to be looked at very closely. And so at least I, spend a lot more time making sure I've looked at every single comp available. I've dotted my I's, crossed my T's, so that when a reconsideration of value request comes through, if one does, there's not likely to be new information.
Yeah.
And so nationally, the success rate for a reconsideration of value is 5%.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah.
I totally believe it.
Yeah.
So you are a proponent of doing an appraisal before you list.
I don't think it's a bad idea. I really don't, especially if you and your agent have talked and the agent is proposing one price and you're proposing a different price, and they're not, you're not $2,000 off, you're off by a bit.
Yeah.
I definitely feel it's worth it. Also, if you are very motivated, you want to get it sold. I have a realtor I've been talking to. She has a house that's been on the market for like 7 months, but the lady doesn't have to move. And the realtor knows it's overpriced. And she's like, she doesn't want to budge. She doesn't have to move.
Yeah.
Out of my hands. But if you're motivated, you actually want to move it. You don't want, you have another house you want to buy, you want to price it to sell, but you don't leave money on the table. I always think it's a good idea.
So if you appraise the home before you list it, and you have this home is appraised at $800,000, and it goes under contract for more than that, does that appraisal, does the pre-appraisal still come into play?
No.
Okay.
No. So for those are private appraisals.
Okay.
So it's between me and the client, whoever hires me. No one else sees that.
Okay.
If they want to share it with a prospective buyer, they certainly can, but it doesn't go into a database anywhere.
Okay.
It doesn't get tied to the house in any way. That it's between me and the client.
So if another appraiser comes in and says, no way, this is only $750, what happens in that situation? Can they come back to you and say, can you appraise this? And we can go back to your $800,000?
So they absolutely can. In those cases, I don't want to know what the value was.
Okay.
I just did one of these a couple of weeks ago. The house was on the market. They had it under contract. The appraisal came back a week before closing, and it was super low. And they called me like, our house is packed. We have already bought another house.
Right.
Like, what are we going to do? And so they wanted to hire me. They did hiring me.
Yeah.
They said, we want to use this for, if nothing else, if you use some different comps, we can supply that to the buyer and they can perhaps use that when they do a reconsideration of value. Otherwise, we don't think we're going to be able to come to terms with this buyer. We need to know what price to list the house when we relist it.
Yeah.
And so that's where I came into play. But I don't want to know what the purchase price was. I don't want to know what the other appraisal came in at, because I want it to be a truly unbiased opinion.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
And then is the homeowner there when you're doing the appraisal?
Sometimes.
Is that helpful?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter.
I feel like I would be so nervous. I would be following you around like, did you see that? Did you see that?
I know you said it's not helpful for the real estate agent to give you a packet of paper, but is it helpful when you get there for the homeowner to give you a list of all the improvements?
Absolutely. And again, any information is always appreciated. And
But
even
in advance is better.
It's better, but even if the improvements, if I'm given that at the appointment, that's totally fine. I would rather have the information than not. Generally, just the comps are the biggest one because we have we have to take pictures of them. So we have to figure out if what you gave us is relevant, if we have to go back and take pictures, or if we can disregard what you gave us. We have to figure out that on the fly versus the improvements. That all comes in once we're reconciling the report after we've visited the property.
So when you get a new order, you go see the subject property and the comps all at the same time?
Yes.
So it's like a 4-hour
road trip. Yes.
Yeah. Like how long are you gone on each typically?
It depends on, if they're in town and how many comps. Some of them are more complex. So I might take 12 pictures just to have backups for once you actually start reconciling. If you figure out, oh crap, that was not an arm's length sale. They sold it to their next door neighbor. So that's maybe not a good comp, just to have variety. So when, you don't have to go back out a second time. That can take an hour, 2 hours. Some of the more rural ones, I do a lot of work out on the Eastern Plains, Strasburg, Bennett, Watkins. That can take 3 hours to drive the comps or more the mountain properties because there's not a good way to get from A to B. You have to do a lot of backtracking.
Yeah. I always hear that kitchens and bathrooms are the biggest things that will increase value in your home. I'm sure that what the homeowner thinks that it will increase their value to is different than what it actually increases their value to. So what is that? Like,
it depends.
Okay. On what?
All of our adjustments are market-based. So there are times when a kitchen update will be worth more than other times because we have to gauge market reactions to things. So there's some times where this kitchen would be worth a $50,000 adjustment. Other times, that exact same house, it might be a $15,000 adjustment because we're looking at the whole market and how buyers are relating to houses in that current market.
Okay.
It also depends on the finish level. So if you're in $1 million house and you put in a builder grade kitchen, that's probably not going to do a whole lot for you. It might even be an adverse update, because that's not what buyers at that price point want. On the flip side, you can do it's easy to do an over improvement. I did one in Littleton here recently where the average home price was $600,000 in the neighborhood and they put in a $300,000 kitchen. So they're not getting $300,000 back in that neighborhood because that's not what buyers in that neighborhood, that's not what the market supports in that neighborhood. And they knew this. They this is their forever house. They were doing a refi. I always try to be a little candid with them, especially for a refi, about over improvements if they are, just to set some expectations so they're not shocked when they're not getting $300,000 for their kitchen when they get the report. So we talk a little bit about this, and they were like, we know we over improved the house, but this was for us. This is what we want. It's our forever house. And so they were fine. But
so what would that add to them if they spent the $300,000 on the kitchen in the $600,000 neighborhood? How do you even do that?
So we can look at, again, we're looking at similar homes that have, they may not have top of the line appliances, but higher than builder grade, nice appliances. We're looking at what buyers are willing to pay in the market for the house and for different finishes. And so, we're not going to have one with that high of level of finish. So we can't do necessarily an apples to apples, but we can say generally what buyers will pay for certain things in that market.
Right. So in that example, saying it's the $600,000 neighborhood, but you did the $300,000 of a kitchen renovation, you can list your house for $800,000, or is that overshooting it?
So in this, again, it depends on the market. It always depends. The market changes daily. And so what I do in one neighborhood 1 week could be completely different in 2 months.
Wow.
Because it changes all the time. We're looking at lots of data, and it's not as simple. There's no rule of thumb adjustments. And I think that's what a lot of people have, some misconceptions on. A garage isn't worth $10,000. A bathroom isn't worth $6,000.
Yeah.
That may be how it was done in the past, but that's not how we operate now.
You just have a condition, like it's just condition, right? There's just one.
Yes.
For the most part. So
yes,
to
it's
your
very
question,
limiting.
To your question, going from 600,000 to 800,000, there's just one comparison
one line item. Yes.
In the report that's condition. That's it. And she brackets it. So she finds one that's in a slightly superior condition, right? Which is hard to do when you have a $300,000
Yes.
kitchen.
Yes.
And a slightly inferior, because you're trying to help understand what is that condition.
How much does that play into the price?
And it's the condition of the whole property, not just of the kitchen.
Right.
So it's,
But we are looking at least I look at, the bathrooms, the kitchen, the flooring, the HVAC. I'm looking at all of those components, and then it gets lumped into one line item. So it's not very detailed for the consumer to read. That's why many of us have lengthy addendums that get tacked on, because we can't fit everything into that one little box to explain why we gave value where we did and why we didn't do what we didn't do. The forms are getting reworked. They're supposed to be out this fall for beta, and they'll read much more like a home inspection report. So each section, so the kitchen will actually, all the pictures will be about in the kitchen section, and the description and the features will all be in the kitchen section instead of having to flip back and forth to 5 different areas. And so we can actually talk about values for each of these things in those areas. So it'll be much easier for people to read once the forms are out.
what's the process of you identifying if the roof's okay? You don't get on it, right? You just notice.
We don't get on the roof.
You just notice
Correct.
if it's like visibly defunct, right?
Yes. So if there's obviously shingles missing, if it looks warped, if they are really old looking shingles, if there's signs of water damage on the inside, or if you can see areas on the outside where there's some water issues, those are things we can flag. Otherwise, we have to assume it's in good working order unless we hear otherwise. And so I have that as a extraordinary assumption in my reports, that we're doing just a visual observation. So we're not home inspectors. And if we can't see the problem and we're not told there's a problem, we have to assume there isn't a problem.
And if there's solar panels covering the roof, it's impossible for you to tell.
Yes. Yes.
Roofs are just such a
So, especially right now.
oh my gosh, it's so
Yes.
complicated. And you mark the appraisal as is because you're like, looks fine to me.
Right.
And then we have this roof needs to be replaced and there's solar panels.
Yep.
And for us, typically we need it to not be as is to recognize it's just like the two, it's hard to work together,
Yes.
right?
Well, we're operating completely independently. There is no overlap. There's no communication. There's a hard wall. And so literally the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. And so that doesn't help when you're stuck in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. Do solar panels add value?
Yes.
A lot?
Sometimes.
I know you said it's
so
relative.
it depends. So if they're owned outright, so they can't be financed, they can't be leased.
Which is never.
Yeah.
It's very,
which is
it's
never.
rare. It's rare. It does happen. I see them, about once a week. Owned.
Really?
Yeah. Owned outright.
Outright?
Yes. But it just depends on the neighborhood. Some of these newer build neighborhoods where they put solar on, they're all leased because that's how they were
So there's
built.
no value because
There's no
it's
value.
borrowed.
Correct. Yes.
Your job is so fascinating because it's like everything is just so subjective and
Yes.
depends on it's
There are no absolutes.
yeah. Like, how do you deal with that? Have you
She's
just
always problem solving.
Yeah.
Like, basically, you spend your whole
Yeah.
career, like she's just always working on problem solving. It's cool.
And then what about the luxury market?
Sure.
So it's not moving as fast as it was. How I would imagine that it's hard to find comps for something.
For some things, there's even if there aren't apparent comps, we can look in. I will do research and figure out other markets that behave similarly with similar style homes, similar prices. So it might be Parker to somewhere in Highlands Ranch. But if those micro communities are behaving similarly, I can pull a comp from a different neighborhood. Or if I have to pull a comp from a neighborhood that's not behaving similarly, then I'll have to make a market adjustment for that. But we have to get creative sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question. Do you always can someone hire you to pull an AVM? To pull, what should I list this house for without paying for a full appraisal? Or what should we offer on this house without pulling,
So
knowing that it's not totally accurate?
Sure. So appraisers have to operate within USPAP, which is
Got
the standards we have to operate
Yeah.
under. And there's very specific steps for how we have to approach appraisal assignments.
Yep.
And so if we're acting as an appraiser, we cannot accept an assignment like that.
Okay.
There are times, especially for like property tax appeals, sometimes it's hard for me to even wrap my head around, to be quite honest, but you have to take off your appraiser hat and you're working as a consultant, not as an appraiser, and then you're not bound by USPAP and you can operate differently.
Okay.
But it's hard for me to disconnect.
Yeah.
Like, I know what I'm supposed to do, and I don't understand how to
fair.
balance both of those.
That's fair.
What is the number one tip that you can give to a real estate agent going into, or I guess we're in now, Q2 in Denver? What do they need to do?
So biggest thing for me, and again, you're dealing with buyer or sellers, and sometimes they're very stubborn. FHA financing is really popular right now because the lower rates, and that's what a lot of people are just trying to get from what I'm seeing. If the house has peeling paint, be proactive and get it fixed. Don't wait for the appraisal because it's going to slow stuff down.
Oh, right.
You're going to have to fix it after I come out. I'm going to have to come back out. It's going to cost the borrower more money. And I don't want to screw up closing.
Yeah.
And so if you know there's peeling paint, if you know there's a leak under the sink, be proactive and get this stuff done before the appraiser comes out.
That's smart.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what about, I want to kind of go back a little bit to the luxury market.
Yeah.
What can they, I mean, I would imagine if your house is $3 million, it probably isn't peeling paint, all
Right.
that kind of stuff.
Yes.
What can that market of people do?
Absolutely. So the biggest thing for that, for the appraiser, is having a full list of upgrades. A line item out the finishes. If you installed some of them, the dates, just so we know when the updates were done. Very, very helpful, because a Wolf fridge that was put in 20 years ago might have different value than one that was put in 2 weeks ago. So the timing helps for us to just assign value. But if you can just let us know the full range of features that you've done. I've been in houses where they put in an $88,000 light fixture in the entry, which...
Does that matter?
It's not going to influence the price, $88,000.
No, but it speaks to the overall finish level of the house.
Okay.
And so when you're looking at luxury
light.
properties, I mean, I had somebody who imported their front door and doorknob from Italy, and they spent, I don't even remember, like $20,000 on this door and doorknob. Like, you're never going to get that back.
Yeah.
But it speaks to the overall finish level of the house.
Yeah.
And so if you've done all of these different upgrades, I want to know what they are at least.
Right.
Because I'm not an expert on lighting. So I can tell if it's not from the shelf at Home Depot.
Yeah.
But if you imported an $88,000 light fixture, I'm not going to know what that is.
Right.
So let me know.
And how do they prove it? Like, could I tell you, oh yeah, that chandelier is $80,000, but I don't have a receipt?
Just tell me the name. So who is it by?
Okay.
What's the brand? I can look it up. And at
I
least,
wouldn't even know that info. Like, if you asked me where, I would say, I don't.
You would know if you paid $88,000.
I mean, yeah,
I would hope.
I guess. I mean, my stuff came from Target, but
I don't know. People, it's like labels. So if you know the light is by somebody,
Right.
you generally are going to know that. It's not something installed by the builder that you weren't a part of.
Yeah. And then what about the super quick turnaround times? Like, I need an appraisal tomorrow.
That's definitely a challenge.
Okay.
Especially when we have to verify all the information. So it's one thing to physically just pull the stuff from the MLS, go to the house, do our stuff, but verifying the information with a party to the sale for who paid the buyer agent compensation, because that's not in the MLS anymore. Mm-hmm. So we have to track that down. And also understanding the concessions and the impact they had on the sale. And so I say I have about a 50.
You have to track that down on the comps.
Yes, not just the subject.
Oh, wow.
So do you tell people no? Like, I can't do it that fast?
If I don't think I can, then yes, I will tell them that's not realistic.
Yeah.
But some of these are rush orders, and they're not flexible on the turnaround. And so we do our best. Yes, for the comps.
Because I do quick appraisals a lot. And I did a lot.
I'm asking for a friend.
I didn't know that was.
Yes.
Okay.
And
That
so
makes
agents,
sense.
I have about a 50 to 60% response rate. Agents don't call you back, don't write you back, don't text you back. And so, we're sitting waiting to finish it. We haven't heard from two people for comps we
Yeah.
want to use. And so we have to put that in the report that we tried, and we're going to make some extraordinary assumptions. And
Yeah.
if that information is false, then we have the right to append our
Oh,
opinion.
really?
Because some of these could change the value drastically.
So what is an unrealistic rush and what's like a doable rush?
Again, it depends. So
Okay.
a 24-hour turnaround for something in Strasbourg would
Let's
be
say all like
okay.
Denver Metro.
Okay. Ideally 48 hours.
Okay, that's reasonable.
And that's rush.
That's a rush.
yeah.
Yes.
I try to do mine within like 3 to 4 days.
Yeah. That's pretty typical.
A lot of mine.
And it helps if the property's vacant, because then we can be a little bit more flexible on when we go out and we don't have scheduling issues. Because also, great, you put it in as a rush. The homeowner doesn't want us to come out for 3 days, so we can't physically get in there to meet your deadline. And so we do come up with those challenges. Or if it's a rented property, coordinating with the tenants, and they're not always agreeable to our timeline.
Right.
And it creates some challenges.
Help us understand more about the hybrid.
Okay.
Can you define it?
Absolutely. So a hybrid is where the lender sends out, or the AMC sends out, a property data collector to the property. They take pictures, they measure the property, they note condition of
So
the
you don't have
property.
to go.
The appraiser doesn't go out. That information is then given to the appraiser, and we have to base our opinion in our report based on information collected by this third party who we don't know. We don't know their qualifications. Property data collectors are not licensed, and most of them only get just a few hour training. Here's how to measure a house. Go have fun. So there's been a lot of reluctance within the appraiser community to do hybrid appraisals, because
See why?
we are basically basing our reputation and our license on work done by someone else.
Is there are you on the hook for anything long term? So some third party goes out, you appraise the house at X dollars, and then that ends up being totally wrong.
Right. They forgot to take a picture of all the holes in the wall,
Right.
or something like that, or the foundation falling.
Right.
Yes. So for the hybrids, I put in a whole slew of, I did not see the house. I am not certifying any of this. I am purely basing everything based on the information provided that's in the work file. I put in as much language to cover myself because I can't be liable for work I didn't do.
Right.
Some appraisers won't even touch hybrids. The thought behind hybrids is that they're faster and they save money. But basically, they take me the same amount of time. The only time savings is me not having to go out to the house. So we're talking an hour or two.
Yeah.
The computer work doesn't change. If anything, it's longer because I have to then wrap my head around what I've been given by this third party and see what's there, how they presented it, what's missing.
So what was the objective in creating these hybrid, do you think?
During COVID, we were all booked way out. There was a backlog because everyone was refinancing.
Yeah.
And we couldn't do jobs fast enough. And so the thought was, if we didn't have to go out to properties, we could be faster and more efficient in our work. Also, the thought was to save the borrower money. But when you look at the breakdown, by the time you pay your property data collector and the appraiser, you're not really saving.
And the AMC.
And the AMC. That's a whole different thing. You're going to have that fee one way or the other, but it doesn't really save any money generally. And ultimately, it doesn't really save that much time because you have two people now who are involved, and they do stuff, and then we have to do stuff, and we can't do it until we get it from them. And so I've yet to see a huge time savings.
What's your opinion on drive-by appraisals?
Drive-bys, again, they were more popular during COVID. I haven't seen a drive-by in a long time. Generally, right now, they're reserved for pre-foreclosures because they don't necessarily want the borrower to know that they're getting the value done, or don't want you to have to interact with the borrower because they're doing it just for their internal value purposes.
Yep.
There's a whole can of worms with drive-by because we don't know what's going on inside the house.
Yeah.
I mean, if you follow the Zillow Gone Wild page on Instagram, I mean, it looks perfectly normal on the outside, and then the inside, you have no idea. And so again, we have to make a lot of assumptions and put that language into the report so we're covered because we were blind pretty much.
Wow.
I want to talk seasonal trends.
Yes.
So right now we are like highest property values for the year is like April, May, June, right?
Traditionally,
Basically.
yes.
And then it just starts falling dramatically,
Yes.
right? Because when I'll encourage people that are refinancing to like, maybe we should wait until April so that your property value could be a little higher with that boost that we get in the spring. And then the same is true when the spring market starts. We have these low appraisals and
Yes.
yeah.
It
you
can
speak
be
to
a
that?
challenge for comps, absolutely, especially last year, especially in February, because we had our spring rush early last year. February was crazy. And I had several that came in low because there just weren't comps in a year that supported the early February rush because we had bidding wars and it was a crazy time. We do have to adjust for seasonality. So we are supposed to be taking that into consideration. So we're making it market equivalent. So we're looking, if we pull a comp from June and we're doing an appraisal in January, we're supposed to be adjusting to make it for comparable market conditions. So we shouldn't be seeing values off because of seasonality because we're adjusting for it. Sometimes just the market doesn't support the price sometimes.
Jen, you are so smart. I'm so grateful to have got to meet you and learn from you today. I learned so much. And I'm curious, where can our audience find you? How can they
Absolutely.
locate you?
So I am very active on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Love if you would connect with me on LinkedIn. I publish regular articles every month on some topics I track specifically and also some market trends as I see them in the metro area. So if you just look me up, Jennifer Wentworth, I should pop right up. And that's the easiest way to connect with me. Otherwise, my phone number is 303-877-5913. Or you can email me, jennifer@mlsappraising.com.
Thank you so much, Jen.
Yeah.
This was such a pleasure to have you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It was
Thank
great.
you.